to win. Today we released the results in Massachusetts' first ever complete inventory of state-owned surplus land that could be used for housing. In total, we've identified more than 36 sites covering about 450 acres of land that could be used to build several thousand homes. And we're ready to get these properties into production because we've streamlined the process of developing public land as part of that Affordable Homes Act. So today, here's what we decided to do. I am really delighted to be joined by the Lieutenant Governor, of course, also our Secretary of Housing and Livable Communities, Ed Augustus, and our Commissioner of DCAM, Adam Bakey. I want to thank Adam in particular for the work that his team has done, working alongside Secretary Augustus and his team, to go out and identify these parcels and then to think about what we can do as a state to more quickly streamline, work with developers. Today we held our first fair, okay? So we put up, we invited members in from the development community all around the state, and we actually put up materials to say, hey, here's a property, this is what we're looking at, come and compete for it. We expect to be out soon with RFPs, with auctions, to get these properties into development, but I'm really excited, and it's just one of the many things that we're doing to build more homes in this state. It's a huge undertaking. This has never been done before, but we're really excited about it, and it's going to be good for the state as we look to unlock more public land to turn that into viable housing options for people. And now with that, I'm going to turn it over to the Lieutenant Governor.
Thanks, Gov. Thanks, Governor. Super pumped to be here. As a former mayor, I think I can speak firsthand for how exciting this is for communities. If you are a city or town that's had state properties languishing for years, underutilized, now you're going to have a chance to do something about that. Not only providing new housing that's going to serve your community and serve the Commonwealth, but also help create new tax revenues, get rid of something that may have been an eyesore. It's going to help us put more affordable housing in Massachusetts, put the competitive disadvantage aside when it comes to the amount of housing that we need across this entire Commonwealth. You can't have a thriving economy without housing that meets the needs of families, of adults wanting to live here, and this is trying to make that, solving that problem a lot easier. We need to build a lot more housing across our state, and we want to leverage every possible tool to do so. So when we've got state-owned land, if we can use it to lower the cost of building, that's going to lower the cost of housing, create more vitality in our local economies, and help us develop the housing we need for workers. If you think about it, your favorite server, anybody you drop your child off to in the morning or helping care for an older adult, they need to live in our communities, and too often it is too difficult for so many people who we rely on every day to live in Massachusetts. So as the governor said, from day one, our administration has pledged to use every tool at our disposal to help address the housing crisis. We pledge to put every possible state asset to work to try and build the housing that we need. We know that solving this housing crisis is going to take more than just land. It's going to take partnership. That's why we're so grateful to have so many members of the development community, private developers, nonprofit developers, CDCs, coming out to look at how we can innovatively work together to have to form a strong partnership to develop the housing that we need. Using this land, we know we can make a big difference in terms of innovation, leading strategies to build the type of housing that communities rely on, from affordable housing, housing to serve our most vulnerable residents, as well as private sector housing, and most assuredly, middle-income housing for the folks who are working hard, don't need or qualify for a subsidy, but can't afford some of the housing prices that we're seeing in communities, places that used to be affordable. That's why we're putting state land to use, to ensure to good use, to ensure that we have the housing we need moving forward in communities across Massachusetts. And the person who is helping lead that effort, I was now pleased to introduce our Secretary of Housing and Livable Communities, Ed Augustus.
Thanks, LG. The governor and the lieutenant governor could not be more clear in their charge to me and to our team at HLC, which is build more homes and build them faster. And so literally every vehicle available to us in state government that could help facilitate that clear directive is what we're all about. Part of that is not only the process that had begun before HLC was put into being as a secretariat, the surplusing of state land, identifying all of the surplus state properties, that was begun by an executive order by the governor before HLC came into being. When we came into being, working with Commissioner Bakey and his team, the first tranche of properties are going to be made available today. But in the Affordable Homes Act, we added language to that law that took out what can be sometimes 18 to 24 months of process that requires going through local community approvals, going through the legislature for approvals to dispose of each specific property. All that has been swept away with and now is able to be much more swiftly disposed of for the purposes of housing production. That's the way that we're combining our work, not only identifying the surplusing state property, but making sure we're implementing the governor's directive, do it faster. How do we do it faster? Remove that red tape, remove those barriers, and that's what the Affordable Homes Act does with this particular project. It also requires minimum amount of units per acre. Now that's the floor, not the ceiling, which allows us to make sure that there are no local barriers to building as much housing as possible on these sites. So it really is this administration looking forward, playing chess, if you will, and not checkers, thinking several steps ahead about how do we take the tool of the surplus state property and use it in a different, more expeditious way so we get better results. And I think by the turnout today of developers, CDCs, folks who do this for a living, standing room only, we clearly see there's a lot of interest and a lot of demand for this property that we think are going to turn into thousands of units of homes much needed. With that, I want to introduce my colleague, Commissioner Bakey, to say a few words.
Thank you, Secretary. And I think, as the governor mentioned, there have been a number of governors and administrations that have talked about using state land to produce housing. I think I'm particularly proud to be part of one that actually championed a legislation that provided the tools where we actually can effectively do that very efficiently. So we were very pleased. DCAM builds a lot of things. We're the construction agency for the state, but we don't build housing. Fortunately, we're also the real estate agency for the state, so we're the ones who actually facilitate those transactions. And it is a real pleasure to be able to work under the terms of the Affordable Homes Act that really, as the Secretary explained, took a lot of the red tape that normally delays us significantly. And in some cases, 18 to 24 months is generous, or it's often a lot longer than that, waiting for the various approvals and processes. So I think that was very helpful legislation that is going to make a big difference in being able to move forward. We announced this morning the first 17 sites to the development community. They are literally located all over the Commonwealth, and they range in size from about 5 acres to 400 acres. And they really will create opportunities to address the housing needs of really all parts of the Commonwealth. I think the important thing is it's just the beginning. There are many more that we've identified that are not quite ready to put the solicitations out, but will be in the coming years. So we can look for likely in September an auction of several of the properties that were here, and we're going to use that tool to get them in the hands of developers as fast as possible among the tools that are available to the state. We have several others where we're going to be soliciting through a more traditional request for proposals process, because either we or the local municipality has some priorities they want to make sure are incorporated into selecting a developer who can align well with those priorities. But all told, all 17 of the properties that were presented today, we expect to have made available within the next 9 months. And again, there will be considerably more following on behind that. And that's really thanks to the leadership of the folks behind me.
Great. Thanks, Commissioner. It's really, really terrific. And thank you again for the work. So look forward to more. We actually have some groundbreakings too this summer, I think, on some of projects that are on public land that we already had in the works over the last couple of years. So that's really great. Happy to take any questions on topic to start.
Governor, so what is the timeline for all these properties in terms of either auction them or putting RFPs out?
Well, let me say this, and then I'll turn it over to the Commissioner. The goal here is to do this as quickly as possible, and I've directed our agencies to do everything they can to speed permitting, to expedite work with municipalities and private developers. We've done this initial process of identifying some 17 parcels. We're going to look to identify even more, but the goal is to build as many homes as quickly as possible using any method necessary. Commissioner, what do you think in terms of more specifics?
Yeah. So we're looking at the auction taking place again probably early in September. We could do it a little sooner, but we've been advised that the development community tends to vacation in August, so we'll have better response in September. We're also going to be putting out some RFPs starting this summer and again over the next 9 months for the remaining properties that are on display today. But again, that will continue. We will have additional properties beyond that.
Why did the state hang on to the properties for so long? What was kind of the philosophy there?
I can't speak for all agencies, but one of the things that happens is while DCAM is nominally the owner of these properties, they all are under the care and control of either a state agency, an institution, or a branch of government. And I think in the past there has been very little incentive for those entities to declare them surplus and make them available. And until they do, it's difficult for DCAM to take any action on them. One of the wonderful things that the Affordable Homes Act did was it actually created some incentive for those agencies to say, we really don't need this. Let's make it available. And that was very transformational to making a lot of these properties viable.
What's the criteria that makes it right?
Well, I think that's going to depend on, again, it depends a little bit on the property, but we have a range of properties available, from ones that are basically vacant land to ones where someone can actually utilize historic tax credits and other tools to repurpose a historic building.
What's the minimum number of housing units per acre that you'd be looking for?
Well, the Affordable Homes Act provides as of right zoning, regardless of what the underlying zoning is in the municipality, at 4 units per acre. What we anticipate is that there will be some sites where that'll be pretty straightforward, and that's what someone will do. In other cases, I imagine there will be a very constructive conversation and a collaborative conversation with between the local community and the developer, where in exchange for providing some other things that the local community may be looking for on the property, either something about housing for whom or what type of housing, or maybe some clustering the housing units. In exchange, they might grant greater density of housing in those locations in exchange for getting other benefits. In some cases, however, the municipalities have actually proactively rezoned. So Bridgewater, for example, the parcel that's in there that's going to be available in Bridgewater, very close to transit there, very close to Bridgewater State University, the municipality proactively rezoned that, and I believe that one is going to be able to carry 15 to 20 units per acre as of right. And that's following the MBTA zoning act in that case. And there are other communities where we're looking at working closely with the community to develop a plan and entitle potentially considerably more than the 4 units per acre.
Commissioner, will every site be competitively bid?
So the Affordable Homes Act requires us to do some sort of a competitive public process. Again, in some cases it will be an auction, which will literally be bidding. In other cases it will be a request for proposals, where we'll put out a solicitation and we'll see what sort of proposals we receive, and those will be reviewed against established criteria.
What does the state do with the money from
Coming into it. So generally speaking, when the state disposes of property, it comes back to the state's general fund. One of the other progressive aspects of the Affordable Homes Act is it also creates a pathway where some of the proceeds from these dispositions can be used by the entities with current care and control. In other cases, we're going to be looking to reduce the price perhaps down to very little, or a nominal price, which actually helps incent the development itself. So we have a lot more flexibility than under the traditional process.
Where in the timeline would you place the Hurley building redevelopment?
Of the properties that you see in the other room, that's one of the most complex, and so that's one that will probably take a little bit more time to get out on the street, but we are hoping to get that, or we're expecting, frankly, to get that solicitation out on the street in the next several months as well.
Do a quick off-topic.
Yeah. I hope, take time to look though. This is, I don't know about you, but when I drive around the state, when I take a walk in some of our great state parks and public spaces areas, you come across buildings that are just like decrepit, right? That are boarded up, that aren't being used. There's like all this land out there, and I just think it's so important what we're doing right now. Let's turn those properties into something useful, and there's nothing more useful right now than creating housing for residents in Massachusetts. We build more housing, we're going to drive down costs, And that's going to go a long, long way. So that's what this is all about, and that's why the teams are fully empowered to go out and get this done as quickly as possible. And you can see some of the properties we're talking about. We're talking about abandoned schools, abandoned state hospitals. We're talking about courthouses that aren't being used, a jail that was closed, right? So let's get after it and turn these structures and these properties into housing so that more people can afford to stay here, right? I mean, I talked to so many families, young families starting out, couples without kids who are just dying to buy a home here, but haven't found one in the price point. And this will be a game changer. It's one of many steps that we're taking to build more housing as quickly as possible in the state.
Governor, can we maybe get your comment about the UNH poll with some of the favorable building numbers?
Oh, I haven't seen it.
It slipped a little bit more. Did you blame that on anything particular?
My favorability? You might not be surprised. I don't pay too much attention to polls. We're focused on the work at hand. And I think the top priority for me is building more housing in the state, Building more housing, getting after our economic development, leaning hard into what we were able to do last year through legislation to make the investments in workforce, in training, and in skills-based learning. Continue with the effort around lowering costs. We started that by lowering taxes, and every day we're looking for more ways to drive down energy costs, healthcare costs, and housing costs. So I'm firmly focused on that.
Governor,
Delivering results for people.
You requested information from ICE about their detention of a Milford High School student. Have you received an update?
No, and I think it's terrible what happened in Milford over the weekend. We watched as it appears that this 18-year-old junior in high school, Milford High School, who's an honors student, a volleyball player, I believe played in the band also, lived here in Milford since he was 5 or 6 years old, was picked up while he was in a car with other Milford High students on their way to volleyball practice. And we've had no information about the circumstance, what led to this. And I think at this point, given that a few days have passed and ICE has had plenty of opportunity to examine whether or not they made a mistake, because they have made mistakes, unless ICE has additional information that would substantiate that this individual had some criminal involvement, he should be released. At this point, they've said nothing about criminal involvement. We have no reason to believe that there was any criminal involvement on the part of this young man, and his family, his community are pretty devastated, and that's why I think, unless ICE has additional information about this young person, he should be released.
Are you concerned about safety with the way these things are going down? Like citizens are confronting them?
This is part of the challenge and part of the problem here. I've said, as prosecutor, as attorney general, I can tell you we all want to get criminals off of our streets and out of our communities. ICE has arrested individuals with criminal convictions and criminal backgrounds, which I support. By their own admission, they have also arrested several hundreds of individuals in Massachusetts and taken them away who do not have criminal records. And what I have said is that as a matter of due process, and because everybody should be following the law here, following the rules here, ICE should be producing information about who has been arrested, what they've been charged with, what their circumstance was, and they should make that available to the public. That, to me, is consistent with public safety and supporting our communities. And, so far ICE has not done that. I know they have an announcement a little bit later today, but already from what you've seen in the announcement, it appears, what I've said all along. They've arrested some people with criminal backgrounds. I support that. I think most people support that. They've also arrested several hundred people by their own admission who don't have any criminal background. And we need an explanation. We need an understanding, because there have been so many reports of mothers and dads being taken out of communities, coworkers being taken out of workplaces. It's created a lot of fear and anxiety in communities. And I want the federal government, just as I want the state and local government and law enforcement, to act in a way that is consistent with public safety. Consistent with public safety. Everybody should follow the law. It's as simple as that. And ICE needs to provide that accounting.
Governor, Tom Hodgson said that you had sought a meeting through him as a conduit with Tom Holman. Why did you seek that, and have you received any response?
That's inaccurate. That's not true.
You didn't seek a meeting
No.
with Tom Holman?
No. I have said, though, I think from the outset, I'm happy to meet with anyone from ICE, including Tom Homan. But we'll see what ICE has to say today. Again, we need transparency. We need information. We need ICE to follow the law. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, great. Bye, guys.